I'm excited to record this as we are taking a look at the crappie in Stockton Lake, breaking down the patterns, locations, techniques, and tips to help you catch more and bigger crappie during the heat of the summer on Stockton Lake. Before I go into covering everything in this video, if you are new to the channel, fish Stockton Lake, or want to catch more crappie year-round, consider subscribing to support me make more videos like this for you, and it will help you keep up to date for when new videos get released on the channel so you don't miss out on anything that's coming out. Let's dive into this thing and break this lake down. During the heat of summer, crappie in Stockton Lake set up near deep water oftentimes is suspended around woody structure, bait fish, and a thermocline. Knowing how to locate these three things will help you locate crappie in Stockton during the summer. The thermocline sets up when the water column separates into two layers, with the warmer oxygenated water on top of the water column and the colder layer where the fish have trouble getting enough oxygen in down below. And you can see a thermocline on a 2D fish finder. By turning up the sensitivity on it in the settings, you'll be able to see the line where the two water columns kind of meet up there, where there's a top layer and a bottom layer. It looks something kind of like this. Crappie and all other fish in Stockton Lake primarily stay above the thermocline in that warmer oxygenated water, so knowing what depth it starts at can help you eliminate water that isn't holding any fish or very many at all. Depending what part of Stockton Lake you fish in the 298 miles of shoreline that it stretches across, you might have a shallower or deeper thermocline or none at all. This section down here on the north side by the dam is going to be your most stable water, so the thermocline is actually going to set up there first, and it's also going to be the most prevalent down there. There's going to be a lot of water down below because it's a deeper section of the lake that holds very little oxygen, and fish aren't able really to live in very well. As you move up here towards the river arms, where you have current inflowing from rains throughout the summer, a lot of the water up here along these different river arms, before you get up here where this blue is at, has a very larger area where those fish in that entire water column can set up at and not have any problems with getting enough oxygen. So the fish could be all the way down here at the bottom up here on these river arms. Either side of the lake, as you follow up these creeks and rivers in Stockton, that new rainwater coming in there also helps mix up the water column a little bit, keeping the flow going and making it not so stagnant of a system there. But further you go down here towards the dam, especially if the dam is not running a lot of water through it, like the lake is being low, a lot of times we get droughts and hot weather during the summertime, which is really when this is going to set up and be the most prevalent. And this section down here right by the dam is where that thermocline is going to play the biggest key role and be the most stable at throughout the summer. This northern section of the lake also holds the clearest water. This is farthest away from most of the runoff points in the lake. So the areas that are up here on the southern arms, though they have more oxygen, the fish can kind of be anywhere in the water column. As I zoom in here, you guys can see that this water depth is around the 30s and 20s out here in the main channel. It can kind of be anywhere in through that a lot of times, especially after some rainfall, and we get a little bit of a mixture, and keeps that water kind of turning through the cycle so it doesn't set up too much. This area up here has got a lot of standing timber. It's shallower. It's more narrow channels. As you get further down towards the northern side of the lake, it's starting to widen up. You get bigger coves, you get a lot deeper water. If I zoom in just kind of right over here a little bit closer towards Masters, you're looking out and you're seeing 60s for your depth in the main channel then. Crappie inside of Stockton Lake feed heavily on shad throughout the summer as their main source of food. Shad can be seen popping on the surface of the water when they are up high in the water column, and can be seen as a ball-like structure on the fish finders. Actively feeding schools of crappie are never far from the shad, so this time of year you can really find a lot of those crappie chasing those fish, roaming around the main channel out here, oftentimes just kind of roaming in the middle of the old river channels near the old islands and stuff, kind of where those drop-offs are. Or if you're out here on some of these main lake points, you'll see those schools of shad pulling out there along with the crappie. It can be for some really good fishing to being able to target those active ones that are chasing those bait fish around. Those are going to be the fish that are going to be wanting to feed, going to be easier to catch. The ones that are going to be harder to catch are the ones that are usually tighter to cover and not as close to their food source. So if they're not around any kind of bait cover, you're not seeing them suspended, those are going to be your fish that are really finicky, but you're going to have higher rates of success, catch bigger fish, and catch fish quicker if you're finding those fish that are around those schools of shad. You can catch crappie this time of year in Stockton on colors like silver, white, and blue that have more of a shad coloration to it in the jigs and crankbaits that you use. A good way to find and catch active crappie that are chasing shad is to troll crankbaits at speeds between 1 to 2.5 miles per hour. Anywhere in the lake you are finding schools of shad near deep water. Sometimes you'll see crappie on your graph suspended down underneath them. Sometimes it'll be kind of right at the same level. But if you're finding some fish that look like they're stacked on top of each other on like 2D sonar, slightly offset but vertically stacked in the water column, those are more than likely crappie. A few of the crankbaits that I like to use while trolling for crappie are these Berkeley flicker shads. I use a lot of silvers, blacks, whites, something that's going to imitate those shad. I would try to keep the size down kind of smaller, around that 2-inch to 2.5-inch range. I don't really go much higher than that when I'm trying to target crappie specifically. Another good one to use are going to be these Rapala shad wraps. You can get the regular ones or the jointed ones. They're going to be really good. You let out more line when you're trolling crankbaits and you're going to be able to get to deeper depth. Use lighter line if you want to go down a little bit deeper. Use heavier line if you want to keep your bait up a little bit higher, especially if you're going around areas that have timber or some brush piles you're trying to kind of keep above so you're not getting snagged in. If that thermocline sets up like down by the dam, around 15 foot down, you really need to be trolling around 15 foot or shallower to be able to catch good numbers of crappie. Another good crankbait to use are these Model A crankbaits. They're crappie killers as well. Find that the more cloud cover you have, and if you're before a storm front coming in the summertime, crappie tend to get fired up by that, just like every other fish in the lake seems to, and they start to feed a little bit more aggressively. If you have that cloud cover overhead as well, I think it helps pull them out from that tight cover that they might be sitting next to, where in those trees and brush piles next to that shade during high skies and sunny hot weather. Some key areas that these crappie will set up in during the summer include islands like what we have here at King Hill, and then we have several different main lake points. Some of them that are more bluffy structure, like swing up really close to the main land where you can see shore. Others that stick out quite a ways. They have lots of different road beds and old bridges, trees, brush piles, all kinds of things that kind of stick off of these. And they all provide good habitat. As long as they're able to be within that thermocline range, you're going to be able to find crappie in there. I usually catch decent amounts of crappie trolling around some of these points on here by the dam on the west side, especially if you get some wind blowing in from the south. These little pockets that are around through here kind of collect some shad, and you can usually pull a few crappie off of them. Moving up the river arms, there's a bunch of flats kind of over here by the Mutton Creek area, Work Bluff. This is a good spot to go and try to troll. Here kind of pops up, and even though you're out quite a ways from shore, there's a big flat area here with points and old river channels where road beds are underneath. There's some brush piles out here and different humps, and this is a great area for shad to go out to. A little bit of everything lives out here during the summertime. Those bait fish pull off into the main lakes a lot of times, like they do on Stockton, back to the main basin. Everything that really wants to eat them is out there feeding. So trolling along through here with your crankbaits, you're going to pick up some walleye, you're going to pick up some largemouth, probably going to find some white bass as well in the mix. Crappie get mixed in here as well. If you know what to look for on your electronics, you'll be able to kind of decipher them a little bit quicker and just be targeting them if that's what you're after. Anywhere along these different little cuts, different humps that are throughout here, the road beds, all this stuff out here holds fish, and it works the same way back and through some of these little secondary points just right in this main basin here. As you go up this major creek arm, you go in through here, there's timber, there's old road beds, there's more brush piles. Great habitat for these fish, and this is a year-round area that you can catch crappie at in Stockton Lake off of this flat and in this cove right here. The areas that are going to be most productive out of all this, and how you can really narrow down what part to start at, is being able to find the bait fish. If you have a graph, try to go through here, scan everything, see where those bait fish are at. If the shad are up near the surface and it's calm outside especially, you can see them rippling along the water, and you can kind of get an idea of what part of the cove has got more bait in it and try to find that structure a crappie might be relating to near it, like standing trees or brush piles, drop-offs, old creek beds, whatever the case may be. If you're finding an area that has lots of shad in it, close to deep water access and some structure and cover, you're going to be able to find some crappie more times than not. If we get a good strong south wind on Stockton Lake, it helps push some of these fish up here onto different parts of these flats as well. They like to kind of come up here on the front facing side a lot of times whenever you're having a good solid wind push up against that. But if you got a wind more of the west, the fish might set up more out here on these edges here. Shad will oftentimes be pushed up closer towards wind-blown sides of lakes, so just kind of pay attention to what side the wind's blowing towards. Crappie jigs, minnows, and small swim baits can be very effective at times when crappie are holding tighter to woody cover, like standing timber and brush piles that are placed for fish habitat by fishermen in the Conservation Department. The Conservation Department at MDC has actually placed several brush piles across Stockton Lake throughout the years, and they have been replenishing them recently as of 2022, 2023. And they've got a lot of these that are mostly cedar, and they're available for the public to go fish. There's a map that I will have linked in the description below that shows you guys all of these. This is a great way to find those fish. They come with GPS coordinates, the type of cover it is, the year that it was placed. The ones I really key in on are the ones that are newer. If you get one that's really, really old, a lot of the branches have started to fall off and they get worn down and basically whittled down to nothing being there. So if you find stuff that's newer and that are out here near the main lake, those are going to be the ones that you want to try to fish. This one's a 2015, that'd be 8 years old. There might still be some stuff there. This one here says it's a 2010, and that's a little bit old for me. That's going to be 13 years old at this point. There might be like just the main core of whatever brush pile they sank down there at this point. A lot of the branches are going to be broken, falling off, and starting to decay pretty good at that point. So these other ones here, like this 2022, that was right next to this 2010 out here on this point, they're going to probably be more closely related to the stuff that's on the inside as opposed to out here on the very tip of the point. So keep an eye on what year these are in. There's tons and tons of brush piles that the Conservation Department's put out here. This is Mutton Creek Cove, and you can see just here just the amount of them that are in there. You don't have to go very far from the ramp to find these a lot of times. If they got a conservation access around, there's going to be more than likely some brush piles in the area. They've got them sunk out here on these bridges. A lot of times during the heat of the day, crappie want to go to the shade. These bridge pilings that are in some deeper water and where these brush piles are good. As long as the thermocline's not really set up yet, maybe you're in the earlier part of summer, or we've gotten in a situation where Stockton's getting a lot more rain than what a dry summer would be, then thermocline's not as prevalent, so you don't have to worry about that as much. The whole water column's kind of open back up at that point, but really, once that thing starts to set up, it really limits where those fish can go. So these bridge pilings, sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they're not, and it really depends on the year that we get with what weather pattern we're seeing. There's one that they've put in as recently as 2023, so that's a brand new one. The ones that are really brand new, I think they take a year or two to really get the algae growing good on them and for the fish to really start to peak and when they're able to be the most effective. But they are something new. A lot of people don't know about them unless you're watching videos like this or doing your research and finding these maps and going out and searching for them. You're just going out on the water and just trying to find brush piles as you go fishing. Some of these new ones, the people may have thought, oh, there was nothing in that area. Well, now there is. And so there's new habitat being dropped all the time. And if you're not keeping up to date with this thing, you're going to not know about new ones that are popping up and where fish are moving to, as opposed to where they have been before in the past. I like to target these brush piles with crappie jigs and minnows by setting the jig or the minnow directly above the crappie structure where those brush piles are sitting at, letting it pendulum over the top of it, or just jigging vertically up through the branches. Early morning is going to be your best time to get good numbers, best bite. You're going to be more active in the cooler part of the day when the sun's still low, not beating directly overhead. So we get that sun a little bit higher in the sky, and those fish are going to suck right back down to where that shade is at and into those brush piles. And they're going to be a little bit hard to pull out of there. They're not going to be feeding as actively. So early morning's best, late evening's a good second, and right before thunderstorms, they're always good as well, any time of day. Not all brush piles and groups of standing timber are created equally. Woody cover that sits just at and slightly above the thermocline in the area, shad are present, are going to fish better than brush piles that are on the bank or in shallow water away from the large schools of shad in the main lake. The main lake's going to be the main hub really for all this stuff to be going down in the summertime, where most of the fish are going to be out in the lake. Some different types of jigs and swim baits and stuff that I like to use are going to be like these Charlie Brewer slider jigs. They got a nice little paddle tail on the back of them that come in different colors. I like the white, silvers, stuff that imitates shad this time of year on Stockton. Seem to do really well. If I'm vertically jigging up through some of those branches, I might use something kind of like a shad pole style of jig. It's got something that you don't have to move a whole lot for there to be action. It's kind of more of a still style of fishing, which is slight reeling up through those branches. You're not really going to get much of a reaction strike out of those crappie by moving a really fast bait over the top of anything whenever they're right in tight to that cover. So this is going to be a good way to finesse some of those fish out and get some more finicky crappie to bite. Your general standard tube jig also is a player this time of year, as it is year-round on the lake. I'm picking the blues, whites, and silvers basically for all my colors. With jigs, unless we get some sort of weird event where the water is pretty dirty or stained, might go with more yellows and chartreuses. If you're kind of in doubt, you go with the white and chartreuse or white and yellow, something like that. If you got a stained area, especially the further up you go in the river arms, you're going to get more of that as we get some rain. Slip bobbers can be set at much deeper depth than the traditional bobber and help you keep a minnow in a strike zone when the crappie are sitting pretty still at a certain area. They're also very good whenever you don't have a boat and you're trying to bank fish, or you have kind of a limited area when you can go. Maybe you're just out in a kayak or something, you want to go try to catch some crappie. You can go to those brush piles that the conservation's put out near an access. Go out there, find what depth that brush pile is sitting at, and then set your slip bobber depth like a foot or two right above that brush pile, cast some minnows down, and it'll hold it right in that strike zone. So anything that's really finicky, the crappie might be kind of sitting tight towards that stuff. That live bait will usually outperform a jig when they're really, really tough biting and they're not wanting to be very active and out chasing bait. The Missouri Department of Conservation enforces a 10-inch length limit to both black and white crappie in Stockton Lake. The most recent fish survey showed 62% of white crappie in Stockton were over the 10-inch limit, and 56% of the black crappie were above 10 inches as well. With there being good numbers of legal-sized keeper crappie in Stockton Lake, this should make for some great days of fishing out on the water this summer and some future fish fries for us anglers. I hope this video helped you learn something new about crappie fishing Stockton Lake in the summer. If I missed something you wanted to see covered or have any questions for fishing Stockton, comment below and I'll try to answer those the best I can. Thank you for staying to the end of the video. Without you, this channel doesn't exist, so thank you for supporting me make videos like this for you. Until the next video, or when I see you out on the water, tight lines and remember to explore deeper. There's more out there.